All right, we're live. I'm just gonna play this game of League, let people jump in because people don't, I don't want to start the video right at the beginning. But yeah, thanks for coming. Not my normal studio, so I got a plain white background, but I'm gonna play this game of League, and then people can come in. Got an episode dropping on what's that thing called? Jay Burden. I don't know why I called that a thing. I got an episode dropping on Jay Burden's channel. My appearance there at 8 p.m. Eastern, which is in about 3 hours and 12 minutes exactly. What else? Oh, I got super chats enabled now. You don't have to give me money, but you can if you want to. Patreon's still $2 a month. Again, don't have to if you don't want to. Yeah, I got episodes coming out with Meta Prime and Prudentialist. Talking to Stone Age Herbalist about him coming back on. He's on vacation right now, or as he would say, holiday. He's all British. If you're in the YouTube chat, let me know how the audio is going. I should probably post this in the Discord as well. Let's see. Public? Oh, no one's watching on YouTube. What the hell? How does that happen? Oops. Ah, crap. Okay. Alrighty then. Yeah, it's a good thing I didn't start this immediately reacting. No one's on YouTube. Everybody jumps in on Twitter, but they don't stay. Okay. Helldivers to a Fool. No. No. I don't even have it, actually. I would have to buy it. But this was at the request of, what's that dude's name? Oh, Rex. He's right there. Yeah, we're reacting to this guy at the request of Rex. There's always so many things going on. I'm ADHD'd the fuck out. Oh, shouldn't have said that. It's on YouTube. It's $40 sub. Is it only 40? Oh, I'll buy it then. I thought it was 60. I don't know why. It's such a big difference, man. It's 60 to 40. It's crazy. I'll buy it, Rex, and we can play. And anyone else who wants to play, if you want to play Helldivers with me and Rex and some other people, then yeah, hop in the Discord. We're going to organize that, when I get around to it. Gotcha. Probably should have hit one of the other dudes, but that's fine. ARAM's really easy to just hop in. Jesus. Get the hell out of here. Gotcha. Run away. Oh no. Okay. All right. I'm getting S this time. Probably not, but we're gonna do it. Hey Rex, can you tell me if my audio is okay, especially versus the system audio? It'll be a bigger deal once we're actually in the once I'm actually reacting to the videos. I need to return my freaking Rode Procaster, which is supposed to be like the nicest thing. It broke. It just randomly broke. I'm really not happy with them, but I have another one. I have a spare one. really just me and you, Rex. What's going on? Why I usually get more people on this thing? What am I being stifled by the frickin' powers that be at YouTube? They're not sending me impressions right now. They just approved me for the partner program and now they hate me? Is that what's happening? Oh well. Oh, you should be hearing the gameplay. Yeah. Oh well, that's fine. We do the audio differently once it's in once we get into the like it's supposed to come out of the system here, but it's fine because I'll be sharing the audio from the Chrome tab, which is a separate setting. Gotcha. Crap. Oh. Get me out of here. Okay. It's chaos. Get me out of here. Oh my. All right, I'm probably not getting that S. Maybe if I really bunker down right now, but I don't think I'm going to. Get him. Gotcha. Kind of. Got you enough. Oof. I really love this game, man. Oh, crap. That was a mistake. That was a big mistake. Oh, well. Okay. Cool. I'll let this happen. Let's put a Zen in. Now we're cooking. Okay. Anybody on Twitter? I also do interviews. I do a lot of stuff on Twitter. I mean, on YouTube. You know. Episode on Jay Burden drops tonight. Check that out on Jay Burden's channel. Happy to have been on there. Zero concurrent viewers. That's good. That's fantastic. Really glad that's happening. I even have it up in a tab. It does not even count. Maybe it's counting. Maybe it's something to do with, I don't know. Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh. See, I can do quite a bit of damage, but I get too close. It's dangerous for me. Should save that. Oh, well. Gotcha. Didn't get you. Hell yeah. Okay, what's up? Again, I will start soon. I do this to let people trickle in. Usually people actually trickle in. They're not trickling in right now. I don't know. See, maybe something's changed. I don't really think so. With the algorithm. I don't really know it that well, though. Middle of the day on Saturday, I'm streaming to one person on YouTube. How the mighty have fallen. Not really. Never mind. Okay, get the heck out of here. Okay, that. Yeah, Pike's dangerous. I should be playing Helldivers. I would appreciate if you guys would like the video. Rex, you still there? It's okay if you're not. No worries. I don't need anybody to be here. This is starting soon. What did I start making? Was it that? Should I start to make that? Yeah. Attack speed, attack damage. Okay, so I'm going AD. Alrighty, probably give me about 10 minutes. Gotcha. Nice, okay. Eating chicken nuggets and drinking a beer. That's awesome, man. I think it's pronounced nuggies though, not nuggets. I don't know where you got this nuggets thing from, but that is not how we do it in frog speak. Rex, aren't you doing you're doing that podcast with movie reactions, right? Get on me about that. Whenever you want to. I think I told you I'd hop on whenever you when you had a movie you want to do. We can do a joint, man. We can grab some movie that makes sense for both of us and use that to promote your podcast, which should get you some listeners if you want to do that. Respond to that whenever, man. You don't have to stop drinking your beer and eating your nuggies. Again, the nuggies. Nuggies. Been super busy as hell last few weeks with new job related stuff. That's good. I didn't know you got a new job. I think you might have mentioned it. Where are you working? That's awesome. Gosh, Pike is so deadly. Got him. Nice. Okay. I'm doing much better now. Where the hell's JC at, man? JC should be here. Okay. Try to lead him. Oh, darn. Oh my gosh, their pike is deadly, dude. I gotta start CCing him. Getting away from him. 7 and 5, 28-30. I'll try to execute, but I don't think I'm gonna have a chance. Oh gosh, they got him. Definitely. Dang, I really don't know what's happening. The YouTube formula right now. If you're on Twitter, hop over to the YouTube. I don't just... Oh, crap. I don't just do reactions. I do a lot of stuff. Check my Discord DMs. Okay. I'm going to do that not right now unless it's pressing. Actually, I'm going to do it right now. Oh, you want to hop? Yeah. Yeah, sure thing, dude. Let me, I'll send you the link. I want to do these streams more often. I want to get on a schedule for doing them. I plan on doing them, and then I just don't. I don't know why. They're a lot of fun. But they're also like, sometimes I feel like it's not great for me to. It feels like cheap content almost, but mixing it in with weekly interviews and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm gonna hire somebody soon, like a consultant on YouTube strategy and stuff like that. Kind of try to clean it up a little bit, but I've been making a lot of good progress on what I'm doing. Gotcha. Chase him down. Come on. Where the hell did he go? Mistakes were made. Rex, were you talking about right now, or were you talking about in the future? I sent you the link. If you didn't mean right now, don't jump in if you don't want to, but you totally can. I wonder what is happening right now. Oh, darn. What's up, Rex?
What's up?
Nothing, man. People should be able to hear you.
Yeah, the last few...
now.
I've been meaning to do stuff, but the last few weeks have just been insane for me.
Yeah, it's understandable. You know, some shit. How many episodes
However,
have you come out with on that
it's just been timing. Probably 2 so far. It's just I hit the roadblock with... I was literally getting phone calls like every other day, work-related stuff, and then just get home from... And then I started the new job this week, and it's just been get home and just pass the fuck out.
Yeah. I understand. That's a thing.
But yeah, I am working one thing that was just a matter of having time to sit down and do it. But this week, it was last week, the new trailer for the new Crow movie dropped, and I just got some thoughts on that.
Okay. Sweet. You gonna put that out?
Yeah, once I have time to sit down and actually formulate proper thoughts and record it.
Right. Okay. So give me 1 second here. I'll be right back. I gotta pee. I've been drinking tea all day. So I'll be right back.
It's okay. Do your thing. I'm gonna. Yeah, I'll take 5 myself.
All right. You here? Rex? Or did you go somewhere too? Okay. Let's get this set up. Dang, maybe I made a bad thumbnail. Oh well. Let's see what happens. Let me get into the edit thing here. Okay. Okay. We're going to start with, are we living through the end of an empire? I'll load this up right now. Take that comment off the screen. Okay. Now let's see. Okay. 2540. We'll start with our end of an empire. Oh, it's not up. There it is. Okay. Starting with are we living through the end of an empire? This is Second Thought. He's apparently he's socialist YouTuber, but he seems to be at odds with other socialist YouTubers. That's what I said in the comments. That's what it seemed to be, because he's got reactions from Vaush and Hasanabi, that freaking little rich kid, where they're critical of him. But let's go.
This episode and others like it are brought to you by the generous support of my patrons on Patreon. If you'd like to help support this channel, join our growing Discord server, and get early access to every video, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought. Throughout the well-worn pages of history, empires have risen, grown to prominence, and collapsed into the mist of time. The Roman Empire, stretching from the sweltering sands of Africa to the murky woods of northern England. The British Empire and her dominance of the Seven Seas. Radio Shack. All of these and more have become the stuff of legend, each with their own stories of success, expansion, and ultimately collapse, unable to bear the weight of their inherent contradictions. But are all empires
inherent contradictions?
Empires destined to meet this fate? And the question on everyone's mind, probably because it's the title of this video, are we living through the end of an empire?
Hope so.
In this episode, we'll take a look at the precarious position of the United States and consider some historic parallels to assess whether the US is really in decline.
Okay, so I'm just going to guess here what he's going to talk about. Oh, that sounds like Rex. His parallels, what's he going to do? Is he going to go with the classic freaking, what's that called? The Roman Empire comparison? I think the Roman Republic comparison is better.
I'll be back in a second.
All right, brother, take your time.
All right, here we go. I'm ready. Nope, that's terrible. All right, I'm ready. Rome. Or are we doing this as 2 takes? Okay, here we go. I'm ready. Rome. The empire all other empires aspire to be. From their breathtaking architecture, to their lavish feasts, to their penchant for feeding people they don't like to wild animals, Rome is truly the shining example of what other nations can only hope to accomplish. We can't really talk about empires or empires in decline without talking about the Roman one. And it just so happens that Americans, from politicians to far-right history YouTubers, love to compare the US to Rome. So, is there something to this comparison? Is the US the new Rome? In a lovely bit of cosmic irony, the first book of Edward Gibbon's ambitious 6-volume work, The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, was published in 1776, on the eve of the birth of a new empire.
That's funny.
One that would go on to become arguably the most powerful in history. In some ways, the United States and the...
I think it's weird he didn't define the term empire. Obviously, the birth of the empire in 1776. I don't know. That's a little odd, given that it wasn't really the birth of the empire at that point. I don't think the empire comes until later. Although you could make an argument that it, even at the beginning, was an empire, having this combination of these very separate colonies that were at odds with each other and did fight with each other prior to the founding of the United States, and even a little bit afterwards.
Do have a lot in common.
Yeah, I really don't think that the comparison comes in until maybe Jefferson's presidency with the Barbary pirates, like, because we kind of were like at that point kind of we were leaving isolationism and becoming more of an external force at that point, and we did kind of recognize that we did need territory, because if we wanted to survive in the global game, we kind of had to play it.
Yeah, so I mean, the Barbary pirates is like trying to stop them from taking our sailors essentially as slaves. But I don't know. I guess it depends on how you define emperor. But let's keep going.
An insatiable desire for expansion, extreme inequality, a globe-spanning network of influence, a penchant for chattel slavery, military dominance, and decadent displays of wealth. There have been countless books, essays, political diatribes, and social media posts earnestly comparing the United States to Rome, and often for good reason. Both empires were bogged down in endless wars, both displayed a shocking level of wealth inequality, both suffered economic crises that commentators in both eras were certain would spell the final end of the golden age of civilization. And if we're being honest, both had about the same response to disease outbreaks.
So, I mean, just so we're clear, like, there were like a bunch of crises that didn't end the Roman Empire. Like there were crises for like 400 years. I mean, So just because we're in a crisis, like at the beginning, just because we're in a crisis doesn't mean it's the entire end of the empire, which is not. He's not saying that, but I want to make that clear.
Which is to say those in power let a whole lot of people die and isolated themselves as best they could. But we should also note that a lot of the people making these comparisons are only doing it because they have this weird thing about mythologizing the United States. It's a very young country, comparatively speaking, so what better way to afford it a little extra grandeur than giving ourselves the title of the New Rome, the shining city on a hill, the glorious republic that commands the world.
So, like, okay, the United States is a young country in a lot of ways, but obviously it's rooted in these much older traditions. And, you know, I don't really like this comparison because this is very common for people to think in this way, but it's not the only way to think about it. Like, the United States is a country that, like, okay, the country itself is founded in like the 1780s, but it's rooted in these older Anglo traditions. You know, as much as I don't like that as an ethnic Irish person, but regardless, it's what's happening. Whereas countries like Germany and France and Italy are all younger than the United States. Like, the only European country that was like unified. I mean, okay, France was pretty unified, so maybe not France, but Germany and Italy were very much not one country. Oh, okay, so France actually, I mean, really happens right after the French Republic, but it was essentially its size already. Whereas you could say the Holy Roman Empire is the precursor to Germany, which it is, but while there's continuity on the land, there isn't continuity in political structure. These are new countries that come out, regardless.
Yeah,
Rex,
and they had that. Well, to go with the Germany thing, they had massive fracturing because back during the Napoleonic time, there was no unified Germany. You had Prussia, you had Austria, you had a litany of things. Like, there was no, like, the Holy Roman Empire when Napoleon conquered it was really not much of anything. And then after Napoleon's defeat, it broke back up into numerous different nation states. And it wasn't until, the Kaiser era where Germany as we understand it today came into being. And at that point, America was already a nation for almost 100 years at that point.
Right. Yeah.
And Italy was
the thing.
Same way. Italy was still very much a collection of city-states.
Right. I think even more so than Germany.
Yeah, I mean, Italy didn't really. I don't remember. I'm sure you know this better than me, but yeah, Italy wasn't really a solid, unified nation until probably. I mean, I think it was before America. But I mean, in terms of
no, it was the mid 1800s.
Okay, yeah, but
there's things like the Kingdom of Two Sicilies, but they very little continuity with modern Italy. I mean, some of it, but it's not even close to not even 80% of the land, not even 50%. Plus, the Italian state is rooted much more in the northern Italian states, Florence, Genoa, than it is with the southern the southern Sicily and the other Sicily being southern Italy. Let's keep going.
Itself. That fits very nicely into the whole manifest destiny, American exceptionalism thing. We'll get back to that towards the end of the video. But first, we need to address what the end of an empire actually looks like.
Okay.
I'm sure you've heard the phrase, the fall of Rome. Despite the popularity of the phrase, most academics have moved on from the term fall when talking about the Roman Empire. The consensus now is that it wasn't any single inflection point that triggered a dramatic collapse, but an agonizing, generations-long slide into a decreased standing in the world.
And this is something that I tend to agree with the mainstream on. I mean, the Roman state ends up, being destroyed, but so the Western Roman state in 476 ending, they still have this continuity with leadership after that for a long time. Like they were ruling in very Roman ways. Like in 476, I mean, the Italian state itself, yes, it's conquered by barbarians ethnically, but they are, they're Romanized barbarians, and they're ruling in the style of Rome. But it's not the same thing as it was before.
And to add to that, I remember hearing it somewhere, but we called them the Byzantine Empire, but up until Constantinople was taken by the Turks, didn't they always refer to themselves as Rome?
Yes. So the Eastern Roman Empire is founded in like the 300s, and they're obviously the two emperors. There's the one in the east, the one in the west, and it essentially, like, Eastern Rome becomes more powerful than Western Rome. They're too large, so they split up, and that I feel like is the real beginning of the end for Western Rome, because their seat of power moves much more into the east because of the Anatolian heartland was the place where they got most of their tax revenue from, which is very important for empires. So once the Byzantines, as we call them, but yeah, Eastern Rome, once they take over, or once Anatolia gets taken from them, they're kind of screwed from that point. It's the end. But yes, the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, has absolute continuity. They were created when Western Rome was still around, and then they were still around up until 1453, albeit the last few hundred years as a rump state of the empire, but continuous with Western Rome with no interruption. Yeah.
There wasn't one single point where we could say Rome was an empire yesterday, and today it's a failed project. The real world doesn't work like that. There were certainly some instances one could point to as chapter markers near the end of the story. For example, around the year 476, there wasn't really an emperor claiming the vast swaths of land the empire had once held with an iron fist. But if we're looking for a marvelous announcement that Rome has fallen, we're not gonna find one.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put it this way: if Neil deGrasse Tyson still says AD, then it's AD.
100%.
That's
and he makes that argument,
like when he was on Joe Rogan. Yeah, on Joe Rogan he made that argument. I'm like, you really can't argue that.
No, if
he acknowledges that the scientific significance of the Catholic Church and the Gregorian calendar, then I mean that is a good That's probably the only argument that you need to make.
It's the same day. It's so annoying. It's like what's so common about this era? What's common about it is that it's the year of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. That's it. Yeah. That's what it is.
Easier to do so in retrospect is a series of minor failures that go unaddressed. Crumbling infrastructure due to lack of investment, rampant corruption, severe inequality, dwindling trust in institutions or leadership, humiliating military...
Okay, we have all of these. We have all of these. Crumbling infrastructure, yes. Rampant corruption, it's arguable, but I would say yes. Severe inequality, of course we have that. It's worse than the Gilded Age. Dwindling trust, yes. I can prove that. I'm not going to pull up the numbers right now, but it is a fact that trust in institutions is going down.
It's not dwindling trust. It's non-existent trust at this point.
Yeah, it's very low. It's very. I don't think any of our institutions are over 50% at this point. I'd have to see the numbers for this year, but I look at those polls pretty constantly. Yeah.
Defeat or endless conflict sapping resources. These all add up to a very real challenge to the structure of an empire. To take the Roman example, the city of Rome itself had been sacked multiple times, but what really did the city in was when the supply chain failed. State-subsidized grain shipments on state-subsidized ships tied up at state-subsidized docks. Eventually, as the state was less able or willing to maintain these mundane but crucial projects, things sort of just fell apart over time. It's never one.
I mean, I don't disagree with it, but of course there's other factors.
Yeah, but I just find it funny though, because this guy, what was the one common factor in all those things that he mentioned? The state. And
right. Yeah.
we have a guy whose biggest problem with everything is, well, number one, his problem with everything is capitalism, and number two is the state. So his solution is more of the state.
Yeah, it doesn't hold up for me, brother. It just doesn't.
One big collapse, it's death by 1,000 cuts. Countless seemingly insignificant failures that together add up to an inability to function. A useful way to think about this can be found in Isaac Asimov's Foundation trilogy, which is now actually a really good show if you're into sci-fi. Much like Harry Seldon prophesied a series of crises along the path of the Empire's long and painful collapse, so too can we take a step back and see a handful of big red dots on the timeline of American decline. I don't want to spoil the show, but suffice it to say that it has a really good understanding of the scale we're talking about when looking at the process of decline. It's not a quick and dramatic collapse. These things take decades or even centuries, but the cracks are already there. And every once in a while, a pillar buckles. The Great Depression, the Red Scares and McCarthyist pogroms, 9/11.
McCarthyist pogroms. Okay. It's fake. Wait, I don't know what he's talking about, pogroms. I thought pogroms had an explicitly Jewish connotation, but maybe not. Look, McCarthyism was real. I've read a lot of the documents. McCarthy was not on a witch hunt. He was finding actual communists. They were there. And he was doing a lot of other things as well, like discovering the early age of these NGOs that were trying to change the fabric of the United States by like John D. Rockefeller, Henry Ford, and Carnegie, like the General Education Board. I talked about this in some of the earlier Illegitimate Scholar episodes.
11. The 2008 financial crash and Great Recession. COVID, and now the handful of crises that have been simmering for decades and are coming to a head. The climate crisis and the collapse of U.S. imperial control of the periphery. We're losing ground economically, militarily.
Okay, this is all true, and this all plays into what's it called? The regionality, the end of globalism and a move towards a regional world, which is something that's expressed by Peter Zeihan, who is of course a neoliberal political scientist, but I did quite enjoy his book regardless.
Geopolitically to China. The U.S. regime's steadfast support for the genocide of the Palestinian people has ensured no country in the third...
I don't disagree with that. That is a thing that's happening, and these other countries like South Africa, BRICS, that are supporting Palestine against Israel and against the United States. This is something that's going to matter in the future when as relative power shifts.
Third world will ever believe our rhetoric about self-determination and freedom again. Just like that, an entire generation of Americans disabused of the myth that we're the good guys. And
I wouldn't say just like that. This was a gradual shift, of course. You got anything to say?
No, I mean, this is one of the few times where I generally agree with him. I do feel like he's going very he's very surface level on it, though. I feel like he's, he doesn't want.
You have to for a 15-minute video.
Yeah, he's not going as in depth as he probably could, probably because he'll end up. Because I feel like he's trying to ignore certain aspects that make his own arguments bad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. It's all selection.
Yeah. This is where the usual Western analysis begins to fail. A lot of people make the mistake of attributing crises of empire to the failures or excesses of individual leaders or people or groups with influence. It's always the other team that's making things go wrong. It's Trump on immigration and LGBT rights. It's Biden on funding endless proxy wars. While megalomaniacs or senile old warmongers can certainly make things worse, the underlying logic of the system in which they operate is the determining factor in how the crises they lead us through are handled. Take COVID, for example.
I know that we will achieve victory and quickly return to the path of exceptional health, safety, and prosperity for all of our citizens. We have to get back to work. Our people want to work. Mm-hmm. They want to go back. They have to go back.
Because the United States follows a capitalist economic philosophy, the key consideration during the pandemic was keeping the gears of the market turning, regardless of the human toll. The prime directive of capitalism is the accumulation of capital, and if that means we have to sacrifice low-paid workers on the altar of profit, so be it.
Okay, obviously I don't really agree with him here, but whatever. Even on the capitalist point, I don't really agree with him. I think there's a lot of rent-seeking behavior, which is far beyond the reaches of capitalism, but it just depends on how you define it. It's still at the base level, yes, the accumulation of capital.
There was no meaningful difference between Trump and Biden on this issue, despite the two leaders being characterized as polar opposites by the media class.
Right.
If you look beneath the aesthetic differences between the two major parties, if you ignore the bombastic rhetoric and empty posturing on social issues and look strictly at the economic base of the system we live under, it's clear that every single great man one could point to is beholden to the same interests, and is therefore more of a byproduct of the system than a leader that changes it.
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay, so if it's not the leaders, then what makes the difference between empires that endure and empires that fall? Every nation and empire in history has faced challenges. Nothing exists in a vacuum. So what sets apart an empire that meets these challenges and one that's on the way out? In a nutshell, resilience. The ability of the system to react to, adapt to, and overcome the challenges they're presented with. Rebuilding key infrastructure after a natural disaster. Reassessing the system after an economic crisis to make sure it doesn't happen again. Taking swift action to protect people from a major disease outbreak. You can probably see where I'm going with
whatever.
all this. Take infrastructure.
Dude, okay, comparing COVID, I shouldn't even say the word on YouTube, but comparing that to like the Justinian plagues, which killed like 15%, 20% of some regions of the Roman Empire, is absolutely asinine. We have to just let him go with it, but that's so stupid.
Structure. Flint, Michigan still has undrinkable water, despite the government finally promising to replace the water lines. Much of New Orleans is still destroyed or underwater 18 years after Hurricane Katrina.
Fair enough.
We have trains going off the rails at a rate of 4.8 derailments per day. Many of those trains carrying toxic chemicals, as we saw firsthand when we went to East Palestine, Ohio earlier this year.
It's so crazy the name of that
United
place
States
is East Palestine.
notorious for letting its infrastructure fail and never repairing it. When it comes to economic disasters, things aren't any better. In the wake of the 07-08 financial crash and the recession that followed, nearly 10 million Americans lost their homes. Those homes were snatched up by institutional investors like BlackRock, and most of them are still held hostage on the rental market today. Did the government do anything about the conditions that led up to this crisis? Not really. They gave a couple people a slap on the wrist, but the vast majority of the criminal executives that profited from the real estate bubble and swindled the American people got off scot-free.
I think the only guy, if I believe, one of my favorite movies is Adam McKay's...
The Big Short?
The Big Short, thank you. Yes, The Big Short. Adam McKay, my favorite director, both for his dramas and his comedies. That movie's amazing. And yeah, there was just one poor schmuck in New Jersey that got caught up and actually went to jail for it. None of the people that actually committed these massive crimes, or what should be crimes.
Free. And now, experts are saying it kinda looks like there's another bubble brewing. Most Americans are worse off now than they were in 2007. They haven't recovered. And if there is another crash, things will get even worse for even more people. Then, of course, there's COVID. Was there an answer to curbing the death toll of the pandemic? Yes. Did American leadership know what it was? Yes. Did they follow the science and prevent those deaths? No, they did not.
Okay. I think him and I have a disagreement on what following the science means in this case, but whatever.
In fact, they did the opposite, waxing poetic about the importance of the market and how valued our frontline workers are. And then they moved on. Over 1 million people died so the line wouldn't go down for a bit. Yet another failure of the American empire.
I don't know what
the
to say.
The United States relies on a system
he kind of
that is
fails
not and can never be
I don't know. I
resilient.
got something for that.
Capitalism demands running the leanest operation possible.
Oh, you do? I also got a question from Winner in the comments about Don't Look Up. I mean, yeah. I enjoyed it as a movie, not the message. But go ahead. You said you had something to say?
Yeah, but as someone who works in the well, as someone he's complaining about, keeping everything going. Well, as someone who works in logistics, if it doesn't keep going, then there's a lot more. You're going to have a lot more than he's complaining about 1 million dead because we kept everything going. Like, well, you're going to have a lot more dead if they don't keep going.
Yeah, it's 100%. Like the supply lines, like what for heating and cooling. Like there's a lot of people that die if they're not at the right temperature, like it's something as basic as that, even not counting the food and everything. Like we need a lot of those supply lines.
Yeah. Well, let's just put it this way. Let's just put it this way, because all these people live in major cities. The reason that you have that just-in-time delivery service, and it's not just food, it's literally everything that you need, especially in a place like that. You can't put anything anywhere in a city anymore. So you have to keep things coming in daily in order for just basic sustainment. So 100%. Like if you don't keep it, he's complaining about it, but I'm like, you also probably live somewhere. He probably does live somewhere that it's 100% dependent that everything that he needs gets brought into the city daily, because you can't stockpile it in the city because there's literally nowhere to stockpile it anymore.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Do people seem to have like there's a disconnect with them on like the things that they have coming to them from these logistical supply chains. Like he couldn't be doing this without the logistical supply chains.
No guardrails. Everything delivered at the last possible moment in the bare minimum amount. Corners cut at all levels of enterprise. When all the reasonable cuts have been made, then they come for the
state is what does this, though. The state is what allows this.
nickels and dimes. That means stripping benefits. No more pensions, no more health care, no more vacation time or parental leave. It means moving from employment to gig work, full-time hours to piecemeal contracts. And all of this is just on the domestic front. Those in power don't care if they have a pissed-off workforce. They know we have to accept whatever job we can get or we starve. There's no choice there. What they do care about is maintaining their geopolitical interest abroad. But once again, because of the logic of capitalism, the empire's grip is slipping. When we're the only game in town, we can give developing countries loans with obscenely exploitative conditions.
I'm with them on this.
We can force them to privatize, to sell off their industry to American investors,
right,
to buy back the goods that their own resources produced at exorbitant rates.
He's right.
Of course, the rest of the world hates us, but we don't care.
That's not really true.
We're the dominant world power. So in
that's not true. The rest of the world hates us. This is a narrative.
The rest. I remember there was a documentary came out years ago. It was about what the world would do if America just became super isolationist and just walked away from everything. But at the beginning of it, they interviewed a bunch of Europeans on their opinions of America, and all of them were talking shit about America and how much they hate America. But then they asked them. They brought up the Balkan Civil War in the late '90s, and every single one of them was complaining that America didn't get involved sooner. So
of course they were.
So they'll openly, they'll tacitly hate us, but the moment that they would have to get their own hands dirty, they want us to step in and do it for them. So I think that the real,
we'll save you, stupid Europeans.
Yeah, I think they will say publicly that they hate America, but when it comes down to actually getting shit done, we're the first ones that they call.
Of course. Always.
To China to cut costs. Meanwhile, China has been taking the long view, thinking 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead, following common sense development plans, raising the standard of living of their people, building high-tech, modern cities that blow our infrastructure and productive capacity out of the water. And then, eventually, while we were busy bombing a dozen countries at once and making enemies around the world, China extends their hand in collaboration.
Okay.
Now there's a second economic superpower in the mix, one that offers development aid without the ridiculous requirements, one that benefits all involved parties, that looks ahead to
this is an interpretation, and like the way that they do their diplomacy is different. Okay.
Collaborative future and not one of imperialist domination.
Dude,
it's no
BS.
wonder the U.S. is losing trade deals and borrowers left and right. There's simply a better alternative.
I think it's better for people to have like different, it helps the power of these smaller nations and helps them to be more efficient if they have two great powers to play off of each other rather than just having the one great power.
And when a country that has become entirely dependent on extracting wealth from the third world loses the ability to do so, what happens? They lash out. They get more violent. They start proxy wars in geostrategic locations to try to regain the upper hand. When a more lucrative or more strategic option becomes available, they dump their previous lackey and leave them to implode and be carved up by foreign investors. There's a reason we're looking at war with Russia over Ukraine, war with China over Taiwan, and war with the entire Arab world over Israel. It's because war is the last chance the US empire has to give itself a shot in the arm and limp along for another few decades as the dominant power. Will it work? We'll see.
All right. This is enough of this one. Let's get on to the next one. Let's get on to the next one. The most dangerous thing in the Western Hemisphere. What's this about?
And get early access to every video. Consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought.
First, I must confess
I'm a socialist, but I'm going to
that over
constantly
the
ask for
past
money.
few years, I have been gravely
100%.
disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom.
That white person that you see calling himself a liberal is the most dangerous thing in the entire Western Hemisphere. He's the most deceitful. He's like a fox. And a fox is always more dangerous in the forest than the wolf. You can see the wolf coming. You know what he's up to. But the fox will fool you. He comes at you with his mouth shaped in such a way that even though you see his teeth, you think he's smiling and take him for a friend.
Okay, I'm with him. I'm with him so far. I'm not going to agree with his reasons, but I'm with him. We'll see.
Okay, let's go. Over the past 5 months, just about everyone I know has come to the same conclusion. Dyed-in-the-wool liberals are as much the enemy of normal, decent people as conservatives are. And when I say liberal, I don't mean your average Joe.
What does he mean,
Potter,
normal,
Marvel
decent
movies,
people?
and doesn't really think about politics.
Like he says conservatives and conservatives are just liberals, by the way, in the U.S. But like he's saying that 90% of the U.S. population are not normal, decent people. I don't think he's using the word normal correctly. It's
Politics outside of election years.
Will you shut up, man?
I mean the people who love Harry Potter and Marvel movies and also go out of their way to scold Palestinians for resisting their own extermination.
Fair enough.
People who demand you condemn Hamas while refusing to acknowledge that history didn't begin on October 7th. People who split their time evenly between rewatching Hamilton and calling anyone who criticizes Joe Biden a Russian troll or a Chinese spy. I think you know the type. But just so we're on the same page before we go any further, let me be extra clear. Liberalism is the default ideology in the imperial core. The average person ends up with a liberal perspective by osmosis. There is a pipeline from simply existing in the empire to becoming a rabid servant of the empire. And if you feel like this is an attack on you personally, please don't feel that way. Everyone should be capable of changing their perspective when presented with new evidence. If you're not, that's a good sign you may have been indoctrinated into a dangerous ideology. But that's what this video is about. I'm going to give you just a little bit of evidence that Western liberals are a tremendous force for evil. And contrary to what they want you to believe, they absolutely do not care about truth, justice, peace, or progress.
okay. They have a different perspective on what those things mean, and I would say that they're misguided, but it doesn't mean that they're wrong. Like, it seems so common to me that like socialist and communist YouTubers are just, they're so, they think that their perspective is the only one. I hate it. It's so boring.
Yeah, I've noticed because they have a bigger presence than like the ANCAP YouTubers, so naturally you just come across them more. But every single one of them, especially in the presentation too, just seems like they're talking down at everybody.
Mm-hmm. Like they're from a position of authority, telling you how it is, and that is how it is. And they're like, oh, you've been lied to. I have the truth. Whereas you've been lied to, I'm going to lie to you in a different way.
Let's start with the civil rights era. A lot of Americans today erroneously believe that when Dr. King came onto the scene, he magically opened everyone's eyes and ended racism. Sure, things were bad back then, but his words were so moving that everyone put down their pitchforks and agreed that we were all equal. And of course, the white liberals were marching hand in hand with black Americans to forge a path to a brighter future. While MLK did have a profound way with words, and there were indeed a number of white Americans who marched for equal rights, this simplified view of the civil rights era is exceptionally misleading. Martin Luther King is one of the most co-opted figures in modern history. Everyone tries to claim him for their particular set of beliefs. I made a whole video about how history whitewashes black radicals. But the thing about these people waxing poetic
they do, like the fact that you learn about Malcolm X in high school and they don't really tell you his anti-white, anti-Jewish, all these other beliefs that are just like inherent to him. Like they push out they select the beliefs in public schools from Malcolm X, from Martin Luther King, to fit their own narrative and to push the neoliberal global world order. I mean, I think that that's undeniable. That's a thing that they do. And they do downplay the Marxist elements of both MLK, especially later in life, as well as Malcolm X in general.
I mean, it's not just them, too. It's also Mandela as well.
Like, right, everybody. I mean, Nelson Mandela was a literal terrorist.
well, here's the thing. Like, everyone kind of does that hero worship of Mandela, and I'm like, well, people tend to forget that, you know, Reagan supported the apartheid government in the 80s, and they put Mandela in prison because Mandela actually did commit crime. I think he was actually in prison for a legitimate act.
Yes, they were killing people. He wasn't a political prisoner. He was
he was an actual prisoner, and you know, they were Marxists. They were all backed by Soviet. They all had Soviet backing, and we all had this great fear of communism still. So that was the motivation, and not to mention, you know, truth and reconciliation. Probably, like, this takes a lot more research to back up, but there is historical evidence to suggest that truth and reconciliation is responsible for half the problems that go on in Central Africa today.
Yes, 100%.
Is that 90% of the time they would have hated the man had they lived in the same era. Think about your family members today and how they reacted to the Black Lives Matter rallies and protests. If they're anything like my family, you probably heard some pretty ignorant, hateful statements. The same exact thing happened in Dr. King's time. Police brutality, rampant racism, and constant attempts to misconstrue what the movement was really about.
Yeah, I don't believe that. I mean, look, you have to show it. Like, you have to show me some data on this. I don't believe in the people that, like, I don't really think that integration, well, look, whatever, however you feel about integration, the way that they did integration was wrong. And also the Civil Rights Act is the destruction of the United States and the destruction of freedom of association.
The thing that always concretizes that fact for me is this comic by the white moderate cartoonist Charles Brooks. King talking to a reporter with the city destroyed in the background and some white people lying on the ground, and King saying, "I plan to lead another non-violent march tomorrow." This is exactly what we see today. Liberals get uncomfortable and suddenly they're not for equal rights anymore. Or more accurately, they still say they are, but they just have some concerns about optics.
They have a perception of equality that is different from mine and different from his.
On how you're supposed to protest, why can't everyone just protest peacefully? Why? So you can ignore it? The entire point of protest is to be disruptive. But even if we put that aside, no one wants to have to protest. They want things to change with as little friction as possible.
I think a lot of people do want to protest, and they want to do it in a fake way.
Just not how things work when the oppressor class likes their position, and that position is dependent upon subjugating another class. It's like Castro said during the Cuban Revolution. The people did not choose the path of armed struggle. It was the path that was forced upon them. Same with Palestine. The number of tweets I've seen from liberals saying, "I don't understand why they can't just peacefully protest," is insane. And every single time, someone claps back with a different instance of Palestinians peacefully organizing and being killed all the same.
Okay, I mean, that's
By the time
happening.
King penned his letter from Birmingham jail, which you heard some of at the beginning of this video, he had become disenchanted with white northern liberals, who had earlier in his career been his greatest source of white support. But when King started talking about systemic issues that intersected with racism, such as economic inequality, these liberals started to squirm. The comfortable whites who looked down on the southern yokels for their ignorance and racism were now in the hot seat themselves. They benefited from a two-tiered society in which liberal elites were at the top. And so the complaint about optics was born. Look, Dr. King, we support your ideals, but the way you're protesting just isn't okay. This is the way liberals operate. They support emancipation movements in theory, but as soon as it crosses into the realm of the material, they become no different than conservatives. If violent protest is illegal, and nonviolent protest gets your liberal supposed supporters to condemn your movement, what recourse do you have to effect change?
He's right. He's right on that.
There's a reason imperial core countries are actively trying to criminalize various forms of protest. They have a vested interest in things remaining the same. As Kwame Ture said in his 1969 book, The Pitfalls of Liberalism, what a liberal really wants is to bring about change which will not in any way endanger his position. That is, of course, impossible when we're talking about fixing the systemic problems of racism, imperialism, and economic inequality. According to a 1966 Harris poll, King's favorable rating among white Americans was just 27%.
Right, because those people were aware of what he was doing in a situation where they weren't like being, he wasn't like, what's the word for it? When rehabilitated by the neoliberal order to put him in a light that supported their own beliefs.
Compare that to 95% today. That's how liberals operate. They oppose any attempts at emancipation while they're happening, then pretend they were always on the side of the righteous when they have the benefit of history books telling them who the good guys were.
Right.
There's
History
a great
books
tweet that really
produced
sums
by
up
the
this
same
liberal
system.
tendency. A liberal is someone who opposes every war except the current war, and supports all civil rights movements except the one going on right now.
What do you mean by he
Now,
wasn't
while
mythologized?
MLK was outspoken in his disappointment with white liberals, Malcolm X went a critical step further and correctly labeled them an enemy of genuine progress and liberation. The
correctly labeled them an enemy of real progress. Like I just hate the way they talk. They talk like they know everything and their perspective is correct. It's asinine. I mean, you know, maybe he's just trying to, that is how you make a strong argument, but it's, I don't know, talking about this stuff, like even when I talk about this stuff, I talk about like perspectives and everything. I don't generally talk about what is correct and what isn't correct, but you know,
I don't know, but when it comes to Malcolm X, all you got to look at is the guy who took his place. And people don't know, people tend to forget this because when they think Malcolm X, they just think the Denzel Washington movie and they call it a day.
Yeah.
But Malcolm X founded the Nation of Islam, which is now led by Louis Farrakhan. And if you ever heard Louis Farrakhan speak, black, white, whatever, that man fucking makes my skin crawl.
Yeah, well, I've actually read some of Louis Farrakhan's stuff, and he's obviously one that they try not to talk about, just because of what he says. But often the reason they really don't talk about this stuff is the anti-Semitism of people like Malcolm X and Louis Farrakhan, rather than their anti-whiteness. I feel like you are allowed to be anti-white. You're not allowed to be anti-Semitic, regardless of who you are.
Conservatives are wolves. You know what they're up to. They're evil and they're honest. Not because they care about being honest, but because they're not afraid to wield power when they have it.
Yeah,
the liberal is a fox. Less outwardly threatening, even seemingly approachable.
I don't know like what his definition of conservatism is. I truly don't know, because like as far as I'm concerned, these conservatives are just liberals today, most of them.
I think his opinion of a conservative is anyone who doesn't agree with him, and that's usually, I mean, that's a kind of that's a simplistic look at it, but I mean it's not really that far off either.
No.
But still a predator. A conservative will usually be open about their racism and how they need to keep the dirty foreigners out.
That's just not true.
Whereas a liberal will say things like,
ridiculous.
I see you, I hear you, hate has no place here. And then they'll run campaign ads about how conservatives are failing to secure the southern border. Biden hasn't stopped building Trump's wall. That should tell you everything you need to know about the liberal approach to immigration.
But this is from 2 weeks ago. He really should be talking about the border wall being... I mean, anybody who isn't talking about the freaking tidal wave coming across the border is kind of an enemy of the state, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they're going to destroy our country. It's the factual endpoint. Like that's what's going to happen. It's a math problem more than it is a political science problem.
Well, here's the basic problem. The basic justification right there here is the the Westphalian system, Treaty of Westphalia. The you know what came up with the actual like definitions of what is a nation state, and the first one that they all came up with was defined borders.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, you have defined borders. So the fact that we're putting up a wall at that border should not be that crazy of an idea, especially when we're talking about, you know, we're getting out close to 400 years of accepted geopolitical order.
100%. And it's being attacked. It's like a country has a right to protect its borders. They have to. And if you're saying we shouldn't protect our borders, I mean, it's a very scary thing. And it's creating something new. And they try to act like we just let anybody in for the longest time, which is also not true.
Immigration. Pretend you're deeply concerned,
No,
and then do
I
the
think
same thing the
when
conservatives
we first
are doing.
started, we did.
Well, I mean, not really. Like anybody in from a certain area, from a very specific small area in northwestern Europe. They don't even start letting Italians and Hungarians and even Irish in until the mid 1800s. Besides the Scots-Irish, which are not Irish. They're from Ireland, but in the sense that they were a subpopulation that was Protestant, which allowed them to come in, and they were tools of imperialism of the British Empire. Whereas later Irish Catholics, the Irish Catholic diaspora in America, isn't really allowed in until the middle of the 1800s.
Or take the genocide in Gaza.
And then you have
We've
to
seen
remember
a handful of the more
the
liberal
context
Democrats
of things too.
What context?
I remember when I was in college, one of my political science classes, we had this conversation, and someone quoted the whole "tired, your sick, tired, huddled masses yearning to be free." Let's just so everyone knows, that is from, if you game, you might actually know that is from a poem called "The New Colossus," when we got the Statue of Liberty from France. And that poem wasn't it got thrown on the epitaph. But the purpose of that poem was to raise bonds. It was a money making scheme. Well, I wouldn't say a scheme, but it was like a fundraiser to provide funds for the statue. Like that. There at no point it was a poem. At no point in our history was that any of that poem U.S. immigration policy.
Of course. Yeah, and I really wish it wasn't there, because it's almost looked at like it's part of the Constitution at this point by a lot of these liberals.
speak out against what Israel is doing, which is no small feat for a politician in the United States. But then when push comes to shove, they do the evil thing anyway.
He's right about that.
As I'm writing this script,
AOC has been actively defending Israel, like vehemently defending Israel. I don't trust her. I'm a fan of her chest, though.
Single Senate Democrat just voted
And that big ass mouth. I love that.
to continue funding the genocide in Gaza. Every single one. It's like the meme. The people on the receiving end of US militarism don't care whether the people who sent the bombs are deeply concerned about it. They're still sending the bombs. Socialists like me tend to joke about Democrats just being Republicans with a rainbow flag painted on their bombers.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely true. The liberals' only objection to imperialism and global domination is on aesthetic grounds. They may say they're cool with gay people, but they're still going to turn the rest of the world to glass if it means maintaining our hegemony. A good example of this meaningless...
Okay, so we got in the comments Buck Mulligan coming in from Twitter. Thank you, Buck. My episode 51 was the interview with him. He is a non-Marxist Irish nationalist. Irish nationalist, not Irish American. And yes, so he's saying the Scots-Irish were the Scottish that settled in Ireland 1600s during the plantation. So Buck will give extra context if he's still listening, but these were these Scots-Irish were people that they were Presbyterians, Scottish, that were brought from Scotland into Ireland as part of the plantation system in Ireland, which was taking land and power away from the Irish people. This comes after the genocide by Oliver Cromwell, mostly in the north of Ireland, in and around County Ulster. And this continued. And these were the people who were given the land, and they were tools of settler imperialism by the British.
Liberal pandering is when Pharrell recently sent Trump a cease and desist to stop Trump from using his songs at rallies. And then he turned around and performed at a fundraising gala for the IDF.
What a scumbag,
the people who've killed 11,000 children in the past few months,
scumbag.
who have targeted doctors saving injured people, journalists trying to show the world what's happening, the people who blindfolded a man, told him to run, and then sniped him in the back of the head. Okay, celebrities being useless is
I didn't
one
know
thing,
about that.
But when you have a liberal
stuff
world
like it.
leader, that's when things get really dangerous. Take Trudeau, for example. In response to one of the many ongoing protests for Palestine in Canada, on February 13th, he posted the following on Twitter. The demonstration at Mount Sinai Hospital yesterday was reprehensible. Hospitals are places for treatment and care, not protest and intimidation. I strongly condemn this display of anti-Semitism. In Toronto and across Canada, we stand with Jewish communities against this hate. This is insane. If you've been online at all in the last 5 months,
That's
you'll know where I'm
absolutely
going
insane.
with this. Justin Trudeau, liberal darling, has supported to the hilt the Israeli apartheid regime, which has bombed every single hospital in Gaza out of operation.
That's
Not
also
only
true.
that, these monsters also dressed as doctors and nurses and infiltrated a hospital to shoot and terrorize the patients and heroic staff inside.
That is also true.
To the
I've seen the
liberal,
video.
walking outside a hospital and demanding justice is a bridge too far. But butchering an entire population because it serves the interest of capital is perfectly acceptable. The justification for statements like Trudeau's has always been opposing anti-Semitism. That obviously doesn't work anymore. It's an absurd claim to make that criticizing a genocidal apartheid regime is anti-Semitic. And it's become even more clearly absurd now that we've seen hundreds of thousands of Jewish people around the world stand up against Israel's ethnic cleansing campaign and say, "You do not represent us." All you have to do is look at footage from within Israel itself. Jews are brutalized by the fascist police for daring to speak out against the regime. The anti-Semitism charge obviously doesn't work anymore. So the liberals have fallen back on what they do best, weaponizing vague feelings. The main objection to rallies for Palestine now is that it makes people feel uncomfortable or unsafe on college campuses in the West. Here's an example that's been making the rounds online.
They want him dead! Please end it, please!
Oh my god.
Aside from the fact that those are the most obvious fake
Look at that. Look at this fake. Please end it. Please stop First Amendment rights. And then they'll say they're not subversive. It's nonsense. I don't think these people should be in our country. Like, whatever. Can't say too much.
Tears you've ever seen, I want you to think about the absurdity of this display.
I agree with you,
Claiming
JC,
to
it's
feel
projection.
unsafe in your insular little university versus this.
مين بدك مين بدك؟
أمي مع أخويا
طيب أنت إيش؟
أخويا أبو نسر
God, dude.
That's what unsafe looks like.
Oh.
You feel uncomfortable? Think about how uncomfortable it is to have no food or clean water, no shelter, no hygiene products, your family killed, the places you've been told will be safe purposefully targeted with bombing runs. Liberals have no right to cry crocodile tears and pretend to feel unsafe. Of course, they'll still do it, and sometimes it will work. There are very few weapons as dangerous as a white woman's tears, as minorities have learned the hard way throughout history.
He's right.
Enough pretend fear and they get what they want. In this case, the criminalizing of solidarity with the people currently being exterminated. I made a tweet the other day that said, "One thing that's been bothering me recently is that I have no power to make liberals care. I can say, I will never again speak to someone who still supports Israel, but what good is that? The hate and powerlessness I feel is something I haven't experienced before."
Oh,
I had one commenter respond with something I think is important to share. This is how colonized people have felt forever. Liberals act like they care, but they don't. They really don't. And their fake performative caring actually makes it way worse. At least right-wingers are honest. That's a great point. And it echoes what Malcolm X said half a century ago. Liberals are no better than conservatives. They're often even more bloodthirsty, as we've seen with their recent behavior. The only thing that separates a liberal servant of empire from a conservative one is that the liberal will lie through their teeth to make it seem like they're on your side. At least when a conservative says they want you dead, you can believe it and brace for impact. With a liberal, you have to be a lot more vigilant. Conservatives don't care if they have the moral high ground. They want what they want, and they don't care how you feel about it.
No, I have the moral high ground.
Will twist themselves into knots trying to convince you, and often themselves, that they are the moral arbiter of modern politics. Even the liberals who are critical of Joe Biden and the wider West's enabling of this genocide often speak out in a way that ends up reinforcing belief in liberalism. Take the recent drama surrounding Jon Stewart. He said some common sense stuff about Biden and really pissed off the vote blue no matter who crowd. But his criticisms also really resonated with the masses of more casual liberals in the imperial core. His statements were intended to air the concerns of people starting to feel cognitive dissonance about their support of genocide, and then to steer them back into the fold of the Democratic Party. Yeah, Biden may be too old for the job, but we'll do better next time. The most important thing is keeping Trump out of the White House. Things would be so much worse under a Republican, believe me. Never mind, of course, that things are only this bad because Biden, liberal champion of peace and freedom, has personally refused to call off his attack dog, and has instead spent billions of dollars of your tax money to fund the massacre of tens of thousands of men, women, and children whose only crime is trying to prevent the slow-rolling eradication of their people.
So I'm with him. I mean, I think most of us are here. I'm going to go on to a second one.
Get some cool perks.
No, but he does make a good point about that, because I mean, I think even some of y'all have fallen victim to it. If you want people to get up in arms about something, throw a pretty white girl up in front of it.
100%. Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I think I've even said
that
it to you
governments
with
use for recruiting.
No, well, and that's the thing, but it's easy. Like, even it's not even just the government; it's also, you know, a specific community. I mean, the most recent one, I forgot her name because I saw the writing on the wall of what was going on, but that girl who was killed by the illegal immigrant.
Right.
I forgot her name, but I straight up said,
Laken Riley, was that it?
Yeah. Yep. And if I'm like, I think I said it to you. I'm like, if this wasn't a pretty white girl, I don't think anyone would give a shit. At least it wouldn't get nearly as much playtime.
Sometimes, it's a thing that's used. There seems to be more use of like non-white women at this point, but it still works.
And help support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought. I also recently launched a new channel dedicated to the nuts and bolts of making a living as a creative.
Mass extinction. There are 5 times in Earth's history where we had mass extinctions. By mass extinctions, I mean at least 75%, 3/4 of the known species disappearing from the face of the Earth. Now we're witnessing what a lot of people are calling the 6th mass extinction, where the same thing could happen on our watch. The data are rock solid. I don't think you'll find a scientist that will say we're not in an extinction crisis.
So.
Oh, what kind of camera was that? Yeah, that's a Blackmagic 4K cinema camera. That's the camera I used to record the Jimmy Buffett documentary.
So, in this episode, we're going to talk about the 6th mass extinction.
Great camera.
What's driving it, and what, if anything, can be done about it. The first thing we need to do when talking about mass extinction is to establish what exactly that means. It's a scary term. For most people, it conjures up images of the dinosaurs getting wiped out by an asteroid and the Earth being plunged into fire and darkness.
Hell yeah, brother.
Well, I've got good news and bad news for you. The good news is that mass extinction doesn't always mean apocalyptic, literally earth-shattering calamities. The scientific benchmark for mass extinction is 75% or more of existing species completely dying out in a relatively short period of time, geologically speaking. Usually less than about 2.8 million years.
Oh, okay.
Extinction is a normal part of life on Earth. So much so that we've defined what's called a background.
What do you mean Russia's under attack right now?
Which comes out to between 0.1 and 1 species per 10,000 per 100 years. I'm gonna look up this in another tab while we watch this. Okay, that doesn't sound so bad. 2.8 million years is a long time, even if we're experiencing a mass extinction event. Well, here's the bad news. The event unfolding now...
Hold up. Pandeli, are you talking about, like, the attack from last night? Is there a new attack? Can you elaborate on that?
Is happening on a scale unprecedented since the extinction of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. And it's happening incredibly quickly and continuing to accelerate. In 1991, 1 salmon species was endangered. Today, it's 14. Countless insect species are already gone for good. A WWF study says that in the past 50 years, the abundance of global wildlife has collapsed by 69%, with the worst effects being seen in Latin America, where abundance has fallen by 94% since 1970. According to a number of studies, the current rate of extinction is between 100 and 1,000 times higher than the pre-human background rate. And that should give you a clue as to what's driving this crisis. To anyone paying attention, it's pretty clear why we're experiencing a sixth mass extinction. It's easy to say that humans are a blight, or we've overpopulated the Earth, or some other vague condemnation of our species as a whole. But that's not the problem. There's plenty of room for all of us. There's plenty of food for all of us. The Earth isn't overburdened. And anyone who claims otherwise is either misguided or trying to sell you on some Malthusian worldview. The problem is that since the Industrial Revolution, the world's dominant economic system has been built on the core principles of extraction, accumulation, profit maximization, and endless growth. It stands to reason that if the profit motive is the sole determinant of the path society takes, any number of crimes against our environment can be waved off as necessary sacrifices. Take logging, for example.
Okay, so just to pull away from this for just a moment, right now, while we're doing this, Sevastopol in Crimea is under attack by ostensibly Ukrainian forces, and that's breaking for the last 2 hours. Yeah, Ukrainian attack on Sevastopol, Crimea, which is Russia-controlled. Ugh, guys, this escalation. I really wish they'd end that goddamn war. Oh, Winter, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you doing that, brother. Totally unnecessary. Like, I appreciate you guys giving money. I just got the super chat enabled, but again, no need to do it unless you got money to spare. Don't. I know it's tough right now. I don't need your money, but thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, more product. Get excited for next product. If you were a Saudi oil baron, I need you to do something. Oh my gosh, I didn't put the video. I'm sorry, I didn't put the video back on.
Once the to deforestation and human-caused climate change, the Amazon is nearing what's called a dieback loop. Since the rainforest creates and relies on its own rainfall,
I agree with you, Buck.
When trees are killed by logging or wildfire, it becomes harder.
So I on the environmental end, I don't necessarily agree with the scientific consensus of the specific stuff with climate change. But regardless of climate change in the sense of like the greenhouse gases and everything, regardless of that, there are truly issues with the quality of our water, the commercial fishing destroying habitats, runoff from mountaintop mining. Like there's a lot of physical, very real, very provable, very easily provable issues. Like I want to live in a clean country, clean air, clean water. These things are important. And they were important to who I think is the last good president, Nixon. I love Nixon. And I think that, Nixon, who signed the Clean Air Act or Clean Water Act, one of them, both of these, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, are two of the only good pieces of legislature, some of the last good pieces of legislature that the United States has put out, unfortunately.
Yeah.
To maintain that fragile equilibrium.
Go ahead.
The problem, it's just, I'm not one to say that climate change is definitely going on. And luckily they were smart enough to change the vocabulary on it to climate change instead of global warming.
Right.
Because you can't claim global warming when everything that you said that was going to happen when Al Gore made his documentary has yet to happen.
Right, right.
But I think that, my problem is that the solutions aren't going to do anything because the solutions are attacking the people who are already trying to do something. The solutions, you're trying to limit. They pretty much are only trying to limit the developing world, and the problem is that the shit that the limitations that they're putting on the US and Europe aren't working. At the same time, you got China pumping a shit ton of coal into the atmosphere, and then you have, India with like the world's most polluted rivers because they throw literally everything into them.
Right. And in a lot of ways, we kind of exported this environmental disaster with the neoliberal capitalist world order. I'm not one that's going to attack capitalism entirely, but I will attack capitalism and the traits of it when they have problems, and that's one of them. I view capitalism as, in its current iteration especially, as the antithesis of conservatism rather than part of it. I've yet to meet the environmentalist activist China Hawk. Yeah, me too. And Buck, I agree with you. The fact they got rid of Nixon proves he was a good one. And what Nixon was kicked out for is something that's almost established. And the things that are happening now by our government are far worse. The weaponization, all that crap.
He got impeached for putting wiretaps in the DNC headquarters. But it's hilarious because the FBI, for a unrelated thing, was wiretapping Trump's campaign headquarters. They weren't. It wasn't for the same reason, but his campaign, like, he was still wiretapped by the government.
And they've also, Obama he weaponized the IRS against conservative groups. Like, there's way worse stuff happening.
At some point, the Amazon will begin to fail, and as it fails, more trees will die, and as they die, the process will accelerate, and eventually, what was once the most vibrant expanse of plant life on Earth will be dry, desolate savanna. That's a dieback loop.
Okay.
And we're actively shooting ourselves in the foot by carving up the lungs of the planet for the sake of greater capital accumulation. Now, the Amazon...
It's also true that the Amazon is man-made. Like, it's man-made. The soil is man-made. Terra firma or terra preta, I forget which one. And I've done a video on this. I've done threads on this on Twitter. They were... Like, there was a civilization there, and it's now overgrown. It got overgrown because the population died from disease. Francisco de Orellana was the guy. He was a conquistador. He went down the Amazon River, wrote a bunch of stuff, but that's the only primary source we have because no one came back for 100 years. And by that point, the diseases had spread, and the jungle grows quick, and it grew quick. And right now, with new LiDAR technology being used in archaeology, we're now finding those places. So essentially, I'm saying that I think he's wrong.
Off is a big picture problem. But if we zoom in a little bit, we can see where the current extinctions come into play. Habitat destruction is a major cause of the eradication of animal life on Earth. Humans have taken over 70% of the planet's land, as well as 75% of its freshwater resources. If we were just making use of those resources and living sustainably within these ecosystems, it would be fine. But the problem is, we bulldoze them, or strip them bare, or poison the water supply with industrial waste, or put up walls that block key migration paths, or kill any animals larger than a house cat because they're seen as a danger to humans. But you might be thinking, so what? They're just animals, right? Yeah, it's sad that some cool animals are going extinct, but at the end of the day, they're just not that important. Let me introduce you to what's called a keystone species.
Let me get back to you on this forbidden anthro. What's the video for the Amazon?
Back in the 1930s,
I may have misspoke. It might have just been a thread, but I'll link to that thread and I'll see if I did a video. I might not have, but I should.
These majestic creatures were killed off in Yellowstone National Park. For the next 70 years, the deer and elk populations in the park exploded, straining the area's carrying capacity. What's more, without the wolves as a threat, the elk didn't feel the need to move around as much, and decimated the local plant population with their incessant grazing. This, in turn, damaged the beaver population, which relied on willow to survive through the winter. This continued on down the food chain. With the removal of one species, the entire ecosystem began to collapse. In 1995, gray wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone, and what's happened since then has been nothing short of incredible. With the wolves back, elk had to be more mobile, moving around to avoid the predators. This allowed the local flora to recover, with once bare hillsides now covered with trees and shrubs. With the trees came the birds, songbirds and ravens and eagles. The willows recovered, which provided food for the beavers. The wolves also acted as food distributors, leaving carrion for countless species, such as ravens, crows, eagles, magpies, coyotes, foxes, and bears. They killed coyotes, which allowed rabbits, mice...
You're totally right, Buck. This guy, I could guess this guy's politics just by looking at him. Physiognomy is a hard science. Yeah, if this guy had more testosterone, he probably wouldn't have the beliefs that he has.
Yeah,
Badgers
do you know who he actually reminds me of? He reminds me of a Scoop Bagel.
Oh, I don't know. Oh, the guy who the LA dude who was complaining. That was on 5 till midnight. That was so funny. This dude from LA tries to go to New York and he complains about how the New York. I don't know if you guys have ever been to New York City at a bagel shop, but you get up, you order. There's no nonsense. You can't do anything. This dude from LA tries to go in there and ask for a scooped gluten-free bagel. He wants them to take the bagel out of his bagel. It's ridiculous.
Animals to recover. The mice and rabbits brought ever more birds of prey. Before the wolves came back, there was just one group of beavers left in the park. Today, there are 9 beaver colonies. But it didn't stop there. Not even close. The beavers spread and built dams, which had multiple effects. They tamed the seasonal runoff, created...
Shout out Jay Burden. Beavers.
Pools that stored water.
Beavers in the comments for Jay Burden.
Provided shaded areas for fish and aquatic ecosystems for otters and muskrats. But most incredibly of all, the behavior of the rivers themselves responded to the wolves. With the ecosystem stabilized and the trees growing back, there was less erosion of the banks.
Speaking of that, my episode on Jay Burden comes out 8 p.m.
Formed, and all of this in turn reinforced the strength of the new wildlife by providing habitats for the many diverse species of the park. All of this, down to the very geography of the park, was revitalized by the presence of one single species. That's why gray wolves and certain other animals are considered keystone species.
Yeah.
Because without them, entire ecosystems fall apart. Now think
So I mean, he's right. These ecosystems they're pretty fragile, and they can be brought out of whack pretty easily when people screw with them. This is why we have so many fires in somewhere like California, when because they don't manage the forest. They don't manage it at all. But regardless,
means that we're on track to eradicate over 75% of animal species on Earth. How many of those will be keystone species? How many that we don't even know are keystone species yet? But maybe that's still not enough. Maybe you still feel like it doesn't really matter, that we're insulated from the collapse. It may be hard to hear, but we are very much a part of this biosphere.
Hell yeah,
we
brother.
don't get to exist outside and above the rest of life on Earth. We are entirely dependent on it for our survival. Let's consider another factor in the mass extinction: climate change. Beginning with the Industrial Revolution, humans have pumped ever more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, drastically accelerating the warming of the planet. Back in the 70s, Exxon, yes, that Exxon, the fossil fuel giant, conducted the world's first truly comprehensive study into the effects of climate change. Their results were shocking and surprisingly accurate. They determined that their activity, and that of the rest of the oil and gas industry, would directly contribute to unsafe levels of warming, which would have untold negative effects on life. In a just world, they would have revealed their findings. But as a capitalist firm, under a capitalist system, they followed the
So he's right about the incentives. Yes, if they found this, and then, the incentives, this kind of stuff comes in with medical science as well, because like in medicinal science, these companies, they do all these studies. They'll do like 10 studies as an example, and then they'll pick the one that has the finding that they want. It's real bad. It's real incentives gone awry. The incentives of a society, the incentive structure, what it promotes, and then what it doesn't promote, you can tell what that society is doing. And I agree with his point here.
Prime directive, the profit motive. And instead of revealing their findings,
the profit
they
incentive.
buried them.
Same thing.
And launched
Motive
the most
incentive
comprehensive
in this
corporate
context.
propaganda campaign in modern history. The rest you've heard before. If we don't cap warming at 1.5 degrees, we're in for a bad time. It'll accelerate the dieback loop of the Amazon. The oceans will become increasingly uninhabitable. We'll face more frequent and devastating weather events, including droughts, hurricanes, wildfires, and monsoons. And entire regions of the planet will become too hot to safely sustain human populations. But what I really want to stress about this is how it will affect our food supply. Remember how I said we rely on the rest of the animals on the planet? Let's start with fish.
We can just eat bugs, no big deal.
Like the Amazon, the world's oceans are a crucial carbon
Bugs,
sink.
soy, and kale.
Since we
man, that's all
began
we
tracking
need.
it in the 1970s, oceans have absorbed 93% of the world's excess heat generated by greenhouse gas emissions. This has contributed to a rapidly warming aquatic environment. They've also become starkly more acidic and contain less oxygen. The ocean is home to somewhere between 500,000 and 10 million distinct species, a massive chunk of the planet's biodiversity, on a scale that would make Yellowstone blush. As of right now, the oceans are expected to warm by up to 4 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. That's a whole lot more than the 1.5 degrees where we'd already be having a bad time. So what does that look like? By 2050, the tropics will see a decrease of 40% in their seafood catch. Shrimp could lose 70% of their habitat to warming waters in the Gulf of Mexico. From 2014 to 2016, Pacific cod populations decreased by 70% in the Gulf of Alaska. Entire fishing communities are no longer able to sustain themselves by catching salmon. Fisheries have closed. Coastal towns have enacted strict fishing restrictions where once there was no need. And low-income countries that are heavily dependent on seafood are being disproportionately...
And just so we're clear, this guy defends China and defends the Soviet Union, defends communist states, but they are just as likely to have industrial disasters, and they had many of them. The Soviet Union had plenty. The Chinese are creating an insane amount of environmental disasters. I mean, the Chinese put in a dam that completely rerouted the ecosystem. They're not above this. So the fact that he's coming at this from a socialist perspective and talking about how this is going to work for, or how socialism would fix this, I mean, he's just wrong. In practice, he's wrong, because the incentive structure still exists in communism. It's still based in capitalism. So yeah, he's incorrect.
Well, yeah, it's just though. Yeah, I mean, China doesn't give a shit right now, and I mean, we're talking the Soviet Union had Chernobyl, the worst nuclear disaster, because they were, that reactor failed because everyone was looking at the productivity and the profit margins, and that reactor was built that way because it was cheaper.
Yes. Yep. And that's still a factor for them.
Unfortunately affected by the climate fallout that is mostly the fault of industrialized nations. And it's not just fish. Food crops are at risk as well. Everything from staples like maize and corn to luxuries like cocoa and coffee are also in the crosshairs. The Yellowstone example should demonstrate just how interconnected the planet's ecosystems are. Plants, animals, even the terrain itself relies on a fragile equilibrium to thrive. But don't take any of this from me. The world's scientists are in agreement. To quote a 2022 IPCC report, climate change will increasingly put pressure on food production and access, especially in vulnerable regions, undermining food security and nutrition. The capitalist tendencies of overproduction, waste, and hyperconsumerism are only making these problems worse. Consumption drives extraction. Extraction drives exploitation. Exploitation maintains poverty and suffering. The myth that capitalism will one day magically provide this wasteful, first-world quality of life for everyone is just that, a myth. And even if it did, the Earth couldn't sustain it. Studies on global consumption suggest that in order to maintain a hyper-consuming Western lifestyle for every person on the planet, we'd need the resources of 5 Earths. This is why people say we cannot have infinite growth on a finite planet. Now, it's important to keep in mind that the planet itself will be fine. That's not going anywhere. It's our own survival and the existence of countless amazing and often critical species that we're putting at risk. The 5 past mass extinctions all happened well before humans came onto the scene. They were natural. A massive asteroid, for example, or increased volcanic activity. The extinction we face today is of our own making. We have the data. We know what's causing this. And we know what economic system relies on causing these problems of extraction, overconsumption, and endless growth. If we want to stop the dying, the destruction of life as it has existed for the last 60 million years, we must dismantle capitalism. Even the scientists who are so afraid to say—
Dude, what? What? What is he talking about? We have to dismantle capitalism? Is he even going to establish how that is going to help the environment? This is insane.
That capitalism is the problem, recognize that this system cannot and will not solve the problems it creates.
I know there's no political will to do any of the things that I'm concerned with, which is exactly why I and the vast majority of my colleagues think we've had it, that the next few decades will be the end of the kind of civilization we're used to.
Throughout history, massive systemic change has always seemed impossible until suddenly it wasn't. As Ursula Le Guin said, "We live under capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings." Socialist revolution remains the only way to build a world that is sustainable and just.
What are you talking
that doesn't rely
about?
on the destruction of the only home our species has ever had. We've known this.
Okay, I need to know. There's 2 minutes more in this video. So now he's now said, okay, we need socialism to solve this environmental crisis. How is he going to back up, or is he even going to try to back up how socialism fixes these problems? Because historically, it hasn't happened. Like, what is he talking about? There is no, the only type of communist or socialist state that ever actually helped the environment was Pol Pot. And that's only because he murdered a third of the population and tried to go back to anarcho-primitivism. He wasn't even really a communist. He was more of an anarcho-primitive. This is so stupid.
Well, now you know why I wanted you to watch these videos.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
capitalist powers have crushed that
it's just funny, though, because he keeps on talking about capitalism's evil because capitalism's all about making money. I'm like, yeah, it is. But you know what else capitalism fuels? Innovation.
Yeah, innovation to solve the problem, which communism doesn't. So communists will just destroy the environment, which they did. The Soviet Union and China, they both industrialized under communism, and they were terrible for the environment. So, like, what is this? Both in greenhouse gases and in, like, the physical environment. Yeah.
Possibility every time. Through coups, invasions, sabotage, assassinations, whatever.
Right, because the Soviets never did coups or oh God.
Keep the average person from realizing that there is a better alternative. I remember when
what is the better alternative?
I don't know, but he just showed a picture of Castro.
And now he's not going to argue it at all. He's just going to go to a picture of him as a kid. When you talk bad about socialists, you're talking about this cute little blonde boy. Freaking idiot, dude. I can't believe this. Go ahead, what were you going to say?
No, he said, like, you know what, you were reacting, and he was just talking about, like, good, so we need proper socialist leaders who do the good thing, the right thing. And he showed a picture of Castro, and I'm like, do you know why Castro is considered good? Because he had Che Guevara do all the nasty shit for him.
Yeah.
And we try to catch fireflies. It was one of the most magical things to see. All these tiny twinkling lights floating all around you. And you'd catch one, and you'd look at it, and you'd think, wow, how does something like this exist? A couple decades later, and I have a 1-year-old daughter. She's going to grow up without ever seeing a sight like that. It's the little things like this that make you stop and think.
Why would you have
the clock is ticking?
You want to save the
socialism
environment? I mean,
extinction.
Look at his office, man.
Which side are you on?
Come on. Which side are you on? You have to be on my side, even though I didn't establish why at all.
Dude, well, he's like, he said my daughter's never going to grow up and see a site like that. I'm like, yeah, she's never going to see a site like that because you live in a fucking city with light pollution.
Yeah. Seriously. Like, oh God, dude. Oh, the worst. Okay. We're going on now to our next video. Let's see what this guy has to say more about capitalism. How capitalism ruined American education. I'm sure he has a really good point on this.
Are made possible by the generous support of my patron.
Education.
Yes.
On Patreon. If you'd like to help support the channel, join the Discord, and get early access to every video, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought.
I'm going to give you an assignment. I want you to write a theme.
Ah, school. Every young person's favorite place. From the long, windowless hallways, to the congealed macaroni and expired milk, to the catchy songs to remember what to do in a school shooting scenario, the United States is truly unrivaled in our educational experience. It's probably perfectly normal that the top 2 emotions kids report feeling in school are stressed and bored, and that a full 75% of all emotions expressed about school are negative. This is a big problem, and it's getting worse.
Capitalism.
What's going on here? Why
I'm going to say that capitalism didn't do this, but I'm hoping that he brings up like a lot of these things that I've talked about in some of my older podcast videos. Like the what did I talk about? The General Education Board, Carnegie, Rockefeller, that type of stuff. Also, my Patreon is $2 a month, and my interviews with awesome people drop every Monday. Besides this Monday, I didn't put one out, but they're on the channel, so subscribe. I appreciate it.
is American schooling so terrible?
In this school, self-esteem will be attained in only one way: racism. And you will address all teachers by the N-word. The school's clubs will be based on Nazism. I will club all teachers who teach global warming. If you leave this school without being murdered or enslaved, this school will have failed.
That's part of your answer right there. Very real and totally unedited video of Dennis Prager aside, we do need to talk about some troubling developments in American education before we can talk about the US approach as a whole. In the last 40 years or so, American politics, and by extension the public consciousness, has moved further and further to the right. We've done a few videos on this phenomenon in the past, which I recommend you watch if you haven't already. But the gist of it is that as
how much you guys want to bet he doesn't bring up Carnegie or Rockefeller or the General Education Board at all? He's not going to bring up the real roots of modern American education. He's just not.
Elected officials, media, and economic policy have become more extreme in their devotion to the free market, it's caused certain consequences.
That is not what's fucking happening. That is an absolute lie, dude. The destruction of the American education system has happened entirely under the watch of the Federal Department of Education since the 1970s. He is 100% wrong. When the public education system in the US was more based in its original origins, which were already bad, it was much more serving of the American population. This is disingenuous as hell, and it might be the only one that actually makes me angry.
Throughout society. The main one is the cutting of corners in order to secure greater profits. That's the prime directive of capitalism. Make more this year than you did last year. The problem with that approach, besides the whole capitalism thing in general, is that there's only so much fat you can trim. Only so many people you can fire. Only so many benefits you can strip away. Only so much funding you can withhold before things start to fall apart. This has been the case in everything from infrastructure, where things are literally falling apart, to manufacturing, to the supply chain.
This is not due to capitalism. It's due to government interference in capitalism that stopped freedom of association and has stopped companies from actually hiring the people that do the work. I mean, is this guy stupid? He doesn't seem stupid. Is he stupid or is he malicious?
Wait, hold on. You say he doesn't seem stupid. You do see his haircut, right?
Fair enough.
And the topic of this video, to education. American public schools are drastically underfunded.
Dude, no, they're not. They're funded more now than they ever have. These people hate capitalism, but they can't for a moment think about solving a problem any other way besides throwing money at it. You're an idiot and you're wrong.
Declining of public education as an unbearable expense is par for the course under a capitalist regime.
And the price has increased, so his premise is entirely incorrect. But even if it didn't, like, the price increasing and then is being spent on stuff that has nothing to do with education, on administrative BS. It's government rent-seeking behavior that's giving money to these patronage networks. It's, oh my God. Oh, you're gonna raise my freaking blood pressure, Rex. Why did you make me watch this?
You've worked. Hey, you picked this one. I was gonna say we go with a different one, but you picked.
Well, this one is perfect for me because it's what I know a lot about.
You've been in the public education system. How many pointless fucking administrators are there?
Oh my God! If you didn't know, by the way, this is something I don't talk about as much anymore. But I'm a certified history teacher. I got certified to teach secondary social studies from the University of Connecticut, which is one of the top 10 education colleges in the United States. The current federal secretary of education got his master's or PhD at the University of Connecticut. Like I am in the top tier of this. I know what this stuff is, and I quit it because it's garbage. Now let's hear more about what this idiot has to say.
Is suffering, they say, as if cutting investments for safe learning environments or school lunches isn't causing those very problems they're using to justify more spending cuts.
The reason they have to cut school lunch programs is because the feds and the state governments have created, they put in regulation that requires the schools to meet their regulations, requires them to spend a bunch of money, and then they don't have money for these basic normal things that kids need, and they have these terrible non-capitalist, these government systems for procuring things. They have plenty of money to buy books. It's their freaking budget that's the problem, and the way that they procure things. This is anti-capitalist. It's not capitalist.
That's old news, though. Free market acolytes have been trying to defund public schools for years. What's new, though, is a massive surge of right-wing ideology into education. Let's talk about PragerU. PragerU, short for Prager University, is a conservative nonprofit and media outlet founded by Alan Estrin, a nobody screenwriter, and Dennis Prager.
A nobody screenwriter. So this guy's just going to insult somebody.
Conservative talk show host. The organization is known for peddling misleading and often straight-up false information in their various online series.
Really? You don't think public schools do that? I once was in a classroom where the teacher that I was on student teaching under told the class of 15-year-olds that in the past, before American chattel slavery, slaves got to go home after a few years. That's what was said in a classroom that I was in. You're all lying. You're lying right now. This guy is lying to you.
I mean, that was, if I'm correct, that was an option for Roman slaves. Like, weren't Roman citizens allowed to like sell themselves into slavery for X amount of time?
Yeah, this is debt slavery, but she was talking broadly about slaves in different places. But like, I mean, if I look at slaves under Genghis Khan threw slaves into a moat in front of his army until the moat of this castle filled up with slaves, and then he marched his soldiers over it. It's not true, okay? It's just not true.
But more importantly, they're very popular. With nearly 3.2 million subscribers on YouTube, slick animations, charismatic hosts, and tens of millions of dollars at their disposal, it's not hard to see why PragerU is a household name. Most of the outlet's name recognition stems from their incredibly popular and easily digestible 5-minute videos, each of which reportedly cost about $30,000 to make. These short videos tackle hot-button political, cultural, and economic topics, with such esteemed hosts as Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, and Dave Rubin. PragerU has been criticized for
Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro should be deported and their citizenship revoked.
For their denial of climate change, revisionism in regards to slavery, and
revisionism? All history is revisionist. It's all historiography. When someone tells you that something else is historical revisionism, it's because they want you to believe in their personal perspective on what history is. All history is historiography. And historiography is when you're choosing what to learn. It is all like this, okay? Any sort of the Black American history that they teach you is their own revisionism. It's all revisionism, all of it.
And the history of fascism, their inhumane stance on immigration, and their generally bigoted behavior.
Inhumane stance on.
And the history of fascism, their inhumane stance.
Inhumane stance on immigration is the fact that we don't just want to allow anyone in. Okay.
On immigration, and their generally bigoted behavior towards minority groups. But none of that really affects them. Why? They have money, they're incredibly prolific, and they don't challenge the status quo. All of these factors have led PragerU to their latest expansion project, PragerU Kids, putting their brand in front of your children's eyes in the classroom. Their videos being widely shared among Wine Mom Facebook groups was great and all.
Wine Mom Facebook groups. So now you're shaming people for alcoholism. That's what's happening. These people try to take the moral high ground, and then they talk in ways that is completely contrary to the way that they present themselves.
It's just as I said earlier. I mean, it's all like these type of YouTubers are incredibly condescending to the people that they see as their opposition.
Yeah, they are.
And I feel like as much as I'm not a fan of PragerU anymore, because I think I do believe you can get too socially conservative. people are probably gravitating to this because they go to school and they're being shown literal child pornography in class.
Seriously, literally.
They've been lacking the academic credibility that Prager University implies. Until now. In 2023, Florida, to no one's surprise, officially became the first state to accept PragerU as an educational vendor.
Dude, what? Okay, you can play whatever videos you want in classrooms. You can play your garbage. What's that crappy dude who does history videos? Not extra credits, but the guy that wrote the one of those dumb liberal romance books. It doesn't matter.
Stating that the organization's content, quote, aligned with the state's revised civics and government standards. If you're wondering what those revised standards are, that would be fascist governor and presidential hopeful Ron.
What the fuck are you talking about? Fascist Governor Ron DeSantis. Fascist? Fascist. Why? Are you going to support that?
On DeSantis' handiwork.
No.
DeSantis has been on a crusade to purge Florida schools of woke rhetoric, ban books, and root out teachers
Good.
who are supposedly teaching things like critical race theory, which is a thing, but it's a very niche field of study at the university level. It's not taught in grade school anywhere in the country. Anyway, Florida...
What did you just say?
Level. It's not taught in grade school books, and root out teachers who are supposedly teaching things like critical race theory, which is a thing, but it's a very niche field of study at the university level. It's not taught in grade school anywhere in the country.
Okay. So I wasn't talking about Adam Ruins Everything, but yes, that guy sucks even worse. But no, okay. Yes, they are teaching critical race theory, critical theory in general, in elementary schools. It is happening. Critical race theory is it's a collection of theories, critical theory in general being the more overarching term. It absolutely is being used as a framework for creating content in elementary schools. So it's possible that what he's saying, he's like, oh, I'm technically correct because we're not teaching specifically race theory or critical theory. We're speaking about this other side of it, which is like, okay, they're inspired by critical theory, but that's worse. You can teach critical theory in school. I think that teaching critical theory is actually fine as one theory amongst many. But when you use it as a foundational framework, it's not good because it discounts all these other ways of understanding the world.
Well, do you remember? I think it's called the 16 or 1791, the 1691 project, I think it was.
Oh yeah, the 1619 project, right?
Yeah,
absolute garbage.
Like that was being treated like actual curriculum. Yet every colonial scholar was like, "This is bullshit."
Right, and I'm sure he doesn't have a video on that, and he still hasn't brought up any of the origins of American education.
Like a lot of these people are very, they're pretty much Zinn followers. You know, you remember Howard Zinn?
Oh yeah,
and
the worst.
Everyone's big on people's history of the United States. Yet 90% of that book it describes things that happened before the first fully established U.S. colony.
A lot of it is
I'm still trying to figure out how America, like people like him have actually blamed America for Columbus.
That's really funny. Yes, the 1619 project did win a Pulitzer Prize, which is why the Pulitzer Prize means nothing. Frickin' Hebrew Prize.
Anyway, Florida is leading the charge to put PragerU in schools. Oklahoma followed a couple months ago. Not to be outdone, my home state of Texas, where our leadership recently revised textbooks to say that Native Americans just kind of got up and left, is also considering approving PragerU. The organization has been registered as an education vendor.
What? What'd you say?
Well, I know, saying that Native Americans got up and left is not really accurate, but it's not necessarily wrong either.
No, it's not. It's not accurate, but it is also not wrong.
I just because people don't. I remember when I was in college. American. When you begin American history, you actually begin with like pre-colonial America. And there were already Native American cities that were abandoned. Like the cities just died out 200 years before shorter years before we even landed on the continent.
Right. Yeah.
So
Cahokia was abandoned in like 1350, I think.
Yeah. So like I not to say that our westward expansion was the right thing, or to take a very objective look at it. I mean, we're talking about civilizations that were already on the way out.
Right. Well, it's like, and it's also that a lot of the tribe, not Cahokia, but a lot of these North American tribes were very, they moved around quite a bit. I mean, you can see this with the language families. Like I know a lot about Eastern Algonquin Native Americans, which is the largest group in New England. And there are Algonquins all over the U.S. because they moved around to different places. This is a normal thing, and it's true of other language groups as well, like the Iroquoian language group, which is rooted in and actually I think it is rooted more in North Carolina, but they were the most powerful Native Americans in North America during the founding of or during the colonization of the country. But the Iroquoians, the Haudenosaunee, were up in the Great Lakes region, but then also the Cherokee were Iroquoian, and they're down in North Carolina. Like, they moved around. So saying that, yes, there were natives that literally just got up and left Texas. That is true. They were also forced out by the Mexicans and the Texas Rangers, but it is true to say that happened because it did happen. It's as biased as the stuff that this guy puts out. But of course, he's not going to acknowledge his own bias. He's just going to talk about other bias.
But has not yet been approved by the Board of Education. Thankfully, teachers in all these states have at least put up a fight, recognizing that there is next to zero educational value in the
There's plenty. In fact, the stuff they teach in schools is such BS that at PragerU, which I don't really have a lot of respect for, is probably better than what they're actually doing.
PragerU Kids curriculum. And for more on the academic side of PragerU's operation, check out Zoe B's excellent video on the subject.
She looks awful.
Despite the best efforts of Florida, Oklahoma, and Texas teachers, PragerU has continued to weasel its way into our children's classrooms. Okay, so teachers can show PragerU videos in school and hand out boring little worksheets. Who cares? Well, besides the fact that their content is absolute garbage on an educational level,
your content is garbage.
Again, see Zoe B's video for a 30-minute rundown. The more concerning thing is that this gives us a good idea of the trajectory of American schooling. Let me explain. Rewind to the 80s. Big hair, boxy cars, and unfortunately, Ronald Reagan. In April of 1983, a commission formed by Reagan's education secretary released a now infamous report. It was titled A Nation at Risk, The Imperative for Educational Reform. The report stated, quote, "Our once unchallenged preeminence in commerce, industry, science, and technological innovation is being overtaken by competitors throughout the world. If an unfriendly foreign power had attempted to impose on America the mediocre educational performance that exists today, we might well have viewed it as an act of war." Based on cherry-picked data designed to yield Reagan's desired result, the document was
prove it. Like, he just makes these insane claims and then it presents them as truth. It's disingenuous. Very disingenuous. Maybe I should do more of this. Maybe I should just spend more time lying.
Used as justification to launch a 40-year war on the public education system. Now, it could have been worse, as Reagan had wanted to do away with the Department of Education entirely and privatize—
Holy crap, dude. That's a good thing. That is a good thing. Number one, he's only talking about the federal Department of Education. The states have their own. Education has always been local. The root of public education in the U.S. goes back to 1635, when the Massachusetts Bay Colony decided to make public education a requirement. In 1635, they had Native Americans shooting at their little settlements that they had for 5 years, and they established public education. And now, when we have the federal Secretary of Education established in what, the 60s or the 70s, you think we need that? We don't. It was better before. We don't need it.
The whole thing. Thankfully, that didn't happen. But what did happen was still pretty bad. It began with using the document's findings, again based on bad data and faulty reasoning, to denigrate the public school system and government more generally. Conservatives had wanted to gut public education in favor of charter schools for some time, and this gave them the false legitimacy.
Charter schools, on average, perform far better than regular public schools, even though they are under attack by the most powerful and largest union in the United States, the NEA, the Teachers Association.
that began to resonate with white suburbanites. Vocational schools were left to rot, neither party willing to stand up for useful, hands-on training for kids who weren't
W in the chat for white suburbanites, my favorite people.
Able,
unless they're liberals,
or didn't want to go to college.
He does make
that
a
avenue
point.
shriveled up and died.
He does make a point here, though, that vocational schools really do get the short end of the stick. I mean, even the GI Bill doesn't cover job school.
Well, the Montgomery GI Bill does, but it's not as good as the post 9/11. No, I'm with them on that. I agree with them on that. And but the thing is that vocational schools, vocational stuff used to be a heavy part of public education. What he's not going to talk about is the fact that it was. He's not going to talk about the 1900s, the early 1900s, when the trade unions were in charge of. And he's as a socialist not bringing up that the unions were under attack by the public education system. There used to be vocational training in our education, and even though it was fought against a lot in the early 20th century, because that was when it used to really be a thing. It used to be controlled by these trade unions. The capitalists, the literal capitalists, Carnegie and Rockefeller, who he's not talking about, who he should be talking about, where this real power comes from, they were the ones who destroyed vocational training, and they got the government to pay for it rather than having the trade unions pay for it, which allowed for the trade unions to have much more authority against these large capitalist organizations that sought to take away rights from everyday Americans. And he's supporting the system that did that. So what, I'm now more left-wing than this socialist retard? Am I allowed to say? Probably not. Whatever.
Leaving millions of American students without
that's fine.
the means to find societally beneficial work. Standardized test scores became the sole factor that determined whether a school was seen as good or bad. Anything that was seen as taking attention away from improving test scores, home economics, recess, the arts, after-school programs, they all became the first to get the axe when a
These come from the Federal Department of Education in its combination with educational private industry. It literally says McGraw-Hill on the thing he's sharing, and he's not talking about it.
School was deemed to be struggling. This trend has continued, from Bush's No Child Left Behind, to Obama's Race to the Top, to the recent push to
Dude, this is all from what he's talking about.
purge schools of the incredibly vague woke ideology that's hiding in every literature or theater class.
It's not vague, dude. Critical theory was established by people that called it critical theory, and they said exactly what it is, and you can look it up. It's not hard to find. You can Google it. Who created critical theory? What is critical theory? It'll be on the first page. You're lying.
The report also had the effect of placing the blame on teachers, the poorly paid heroes who do the thankless work of educating the next generation. From the moment the report was released, teachers became the scapegoat for every academic failing, rather than the systemic economic issues which were caused by the very government that commissioned the bogus report. This trend has also continued to the modern day, with far-right culture warriors accusing teachers of poisoning the minds of students with their radical left agenda.
They are.
You can draw a straight red line from Reagan's report to the war being waged for American education today.
Dude, you can draw a straight red line back. Why are you starting in the 1980s? You idiot.
A lot of this is on the cultural side of things. Yes, it's bad that the far right is trying to do book burnings and force students to conform to some weird patriotic ideology. Yes, it's bad that PragerU is allowed anywhere near a school classroom. But that doesn't get to the core issue of American education. Under a capitalist system, where the prime directive is the profit motive, the accumulation of capital, what good is a well-funded school system if it does not produce the maximum number of exploitable workers? It's fun to bash Reagan, and he was genuinely terrible, but really, we can trace a lot of modern schooling's failings all the way back to the Industrial Revolution and the birth of capitalism itself. This is a massive topic, so I'm going
Okay, wait, I gotta go back.
Only terrible, but really, we can trace a lot of modern schooling's failings all the way back to the Industrial Revolution and the birth of capitalism itself.
Okay, this is the part where he might actually get into what I've been hoping that he talks about. So, okay, I'm gonna take a step back here, and I'm gonna just, I'll calm myself down as best I can with a zen in, and let's see what he has to say.
This is a massive topic, so I'm going to leave a bunch of resources in the description if you'd like to learn more. But here's the short version. Feudalism slowly gives way to capitalism. Hooray, new merchant class, upward mobility for some. Things are going great. We love money. Now we've got some new machines and we need people to keep them running. Let's bring all the workers from the countryside into the city to work in our factories. Oh wow, this is even better. We're making so much money. But some of these guys are getting a little full of themselves and demanding more pay. Let's hyper-specialize these jobs. That guy inserts the bolt, the next guy screws it down, nobody has the full set of skills to produce the end product. Now we're talking, these people have nothing to bargain with anymore. We can pay them less and fire them if they complain.
Okay, this is not true because the trade unions were defending their vocational training and they were in control of it and they were paying for it themselves, which brought them in line with these unions. I know a lot of you are probably anti-union. I am pro-union in the sense of them existing as something. Well, look, in general, I'm pro-union in the sense that I think they need to exist. There are iterations of them that are very bad, but a lot of that comes from other specific things. These trade unions won us a lot of the workers' rights that we have today.
It's easy to train a new bolt turner. Get the picture? Each step taken by the capitalist class has been calculated to increase the exploitability of labor.
Why are you not talking about
the same is true of pretty much everything in a free market economy. Education has an asterisk attached, though. We don't live in a world of giant factories and brute force production anymore. We need to compete on a world scale in arenas like physics, aerospace engineering, global logistics. These things require serious education and training. So why would we shoot ourselves in the foot by cutting costs and not investing in future engineers and physicists? Well, it goes back to the profit motive. What will yield the quickest return on investment? A kid who goes to a well-funded school, graduates, goes into massive debt to earn a degree in quantum computing, and maybe lands a job in their niche? Or a million docile, conditioned little worker drones who understand that the bell means get to work, your teacher is the boss, no socializing allowed, and is trained to regurgitate information that doesn't really matter. That sounds like a good little Best Buy worker to me. Or food service, or a call center. We have a service economy in the United States. 80% of jobs in this country are part of the service industry. We don't need well-funded public schools. If we want a particle physicist, we'll pluck some kid from a nice private school and make sure
he's not bringing up that the entire public school system was created in the 1890s into the 1920s with the express purpose of creating factory workers and taking power away from trade unions. Why is a guy that calling himself a socialist not talking about the attack of these capitalists on trade? It's backwards. I don't know. I think this guy's very weird. Maybe he just doesn't know about it, but he kind of touched on it, but not the specifics. He's just talking very broadly.
I don't know.
He ends up in the right
He
universe.
sounds like one of those guys who's just a pure product of the environment that he's currently complaining about.
I don't know, dude.
The ruling class, of both parties by the way, understands that in an economy based entirely on consumption, we just don't need to waste money on producing the finest students in the world. There's a reason the US's global educational standing is slipping, particularly in math and science. There's a reason
we had the best education system in the world, even though it wasn't really originally intended on doing the best education before the Department of Education was founded. You can draw a direct line to the founding of the Department of Education, Federal Department of Education, which this man defends. And yet he's talking about the lack of it. Oh my God.
Countries like China, which do not subscribe to a free market ideology, are thinking long-term, producing well-equipped graduates, and are now able to challenge the United States economically and geopolitically. We sold our souls for short-term profit maximization. What you see around you are the results of that. Crumbling infrastructure, massive inequality, rampant poverty and homelessness, a declining quality of life, and a gutted public school system. A public school system, by the way, which the ruling class was once okay with being a source of docile labor, but now expects the students to be indoctrinated into the same patriotic free market cult that has sold their future for a quick buck. That's why PragerU is in your kid's classroom. On the small scale, branding.
No, it's not.
Lends credibility to PragerU's operation and it makes them money. On the large scale, reproduction of social norms desirable to the ruling class. Proud of America, programmed to be obedient, unequipped for anything but service, whether that's in fast food or in the military. So when we see things like PragerU being injected into the public school curriculum, it's important to dig a little deeper and understand why these things happen. Nothing happens in a vacuum. There is an economic reality that determines what our culture looks like. And this is only one example. Capitalism is not equipped to solve the problems it creates. We want to be the dominant world power, but we don't manufacture anything. We don't lead in many industries besides defense. Our government is overwhelmingly hated by the average person. When the only thing that matters is the next dollar, scraping the tiniest bit of fat off an already lean operation, making sure operating costs are as low as humanly possible, eventually you get to a point where there's no more fat to trim. We're now in a period that's popularly called late-stage capitalism, and maybe for good reason. As the US loses its iron grip on the rest of the world, as we lose our imperial holdings and the rate of profit continues to fall, things will continue to get worse here at home.
I hate PragerU because of the Zionism rather than anything else, what he's describing.
Education system, one of the most hot-button issues of a few years, will continue to be a battleground, and the ones who suffer will be the children, caught between a school shooter created by the alienation inherent to our system and a fascist governor who wants to make sure little Timmy isn't exposed to any ideas that might call into question American exceptionalism. If this is what capitalism produces, maybe it's time to try something else.
Maybe it is.
I mentioned at the beginning of the episode that my content is only available to my patrons on Patreon.
I'm any last questions on this? That's the last one I'm gonna do. Man on Twitter, _scholar. Got a bunch of thread on anthropology stuff, conservative anthropology stuff. Yeah, Patreon's $2 a month. In 50 minutes from right now, my episode is dropping on Jay Burden's channel. I'll link to that down below. I would appreciate you guys hopping over there, showing me some support, and also it's a great conversation. He's a great dude. Any questions, I'll answer them now, and then I'm going to hop off for a little bit. I got my episode dropping with Meta Prime on Monday. The Monday after that, I got the Prudentialist, and then I should have some other good guys on. Yeah, and you're right about that, Buck. The late stage capitalism was it was found a long time ago. The term heavily predates today. But also, when he says it's commonly called that, it's kind of just called that by communists. I use the term too because I think it's a pretty good term to describe what we're going through. But you know, whatever. Any questions, Rex? You got anything?
No, just you know, I finally got you to watch these, and then I finally got you to spaz out about them because I mean, the general, even when he is making good points, everything just boils down to everything's capitalism's fault, and socialism will fix it. But watching these again, I kind of started noticing something is that he'll always go into, we need socialism to fix this, but he doesn't explain how socialism is going to fix it.
Right.
And it kind of reminds me of Libertarian Party members, is how they just they're like, you guys aren't doing it wrong, we'll do it better, and then you ask them how, and then they just start saying dumb shit.
Fully agree. So yes, Winter, I will probably never react to Second Thought videos again. I did this because Rex, who's one of my most dedicated supporters, appreciate Rex coming on here. He also has his own show, which you only have 2 episodes out right now. But
yeah, I try to have my own show, but shit be getting busy for me in my personal life, and oh well. That and I ain't gonna lie, I do kind of suck at it too.
No, I mean, you know, you get better at it. You go to my first episodes; they're not that good, and I have the backing of having a bachelor's degree in education.
I mean, to be brutally honest, your current episodes aren't all that great either.
Fair enough.
No, but it just, you know, this whole education thing. My up until recently, my brother was a teacher and he was a teacher for 10, 15 years now. Yeah, and he left the education. He just said, well, they were trying to go after him. And he just said he took his ball and went home because he kind of got tired of essentially the New York, at least where he was teaching here in New York, they allowed the inmates to take over the asylum.
Oh yeah, dude, 100%. That's happening everywhere.
I mean, that's a conversation for a separate time, but I mean,
go ahead, finish.
Yeah, I just remember he was telling me 2 things that I remember was that apparently there was some like urinal challenge on TikTok to like rip a urinal off the wall. So that was going on rampantly.
What?
And then some girl whose mom was like a school board member got caught bringing a stun gun into school. And in all these situations, no one got disciplined for anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gotten to the point, and I've actually saw something recently about it now, but essentially they're just pushing kids through the system.
Yes, that is 100% happening. The other thing that I'll say is that they are applying in schools. I know this is happening in Connecticut because I seen it, but I think this is happening federally. Is that they're applying the concept of DEI, specifically the equity portion, diversity, equity, inclusion. I prefer diversity, inclusion, and equity for DI, but they're applying that now to discipline. So the discipline rates on students are now have to match, or there has to be, when they're disciplining students, if you discipline black kids twice as much as white kids or Asian kids, that is an issue of DEI. And so you cannot discipline black kids the same as you discipline white kids from a practical standpoint. And that's not good because certain races might have different rates of bad behavior. And we see that. So, okay, I checked it out. It was actually first used in 1902. Yeah, regardless, late stage capitalism is an old term. Yeah, ridiculous. Yeah, John Taylor Gatto is the best. He has some great books on education. I'll link to one down below. And yeah, this is some crazy stuff, man. All right, later, guys. Go check out that Jay Burden stream. I dropped a link in the comments.